Hyde was no place to be during the peak of this summer's extreme heat, but of course many Texans had little choice. An investigation by Houston Public Media found those relying on public transportation encountered dangerously hot temperatures at the city's bus shelters. Reporters Sarah Willa Ernst and Katie Watkins took their findings and potential solutions to elected officials and bus riders to get their response. Katie begins.
We published a survey asking listeners, particularly transit riders, about what they thought of the story and what solutions they'd like to see.
You really dove deep into the bus shelter world, and I learned a lot from what was written.
As an advocate, I feel vindicated in many ways by the reporting. This is something that we've talked to community every single day about, and we experience this every single day.
That last voice was Gabe Casares with Link Houston, a local advocacy group focused on public transit. He says the findings from our pilot study tracked with his personal experience taking the bus every day and the riders his group advocates for. To recap our findings, most of the bus shelters where we took measurements reached dangerously hot levels. And sometimes bus shelters made the heat worse. Standing inside was hotter than standing in direct sunlight. We had heard this from riders beforehand, and more reached out to share their experience. Here's writer Austin Stakes.
The only problem is there's very poor air circulation. So as the day goes on, the shelter, like a greenhouse, just starts heating up the air that's trapped inside. Standing in one at 3 in the afternoon on a triple-digit day is absolutely brutal. Even standing inside, you can just feel the heat radiating from the material against your back.
The same can't be said about trees. Trees were on average twice as effective as bus shelters at cooling, and trees never once made the heat worse. Writer Marika Moore told us she often looks for tree shade when she's waiting for the bus and thinks it makes sense as a solution.
I would just add more tree canopy, even if it costs a car lane. Just add more trees, and that would be the step number one. And then hopefully in the future, those trees will be big enough to really provide shade.
Trees were one of the main solutions we highlighted in episode 3. Plant a tree at every bus stop when there's enough space for them. Where there isn't, how do we redesign streets to make more space? We also looked at how bus shelters could be redesigned for the heat. But how do we make these solutions a reality? We reached out to the people in power who can do something about it.
Well, I'm going to bring it up, yes.
Sally Alcorn is on Houston City Council and is up for re-election. She says she plans to bring up the issue with her colleagues.
I'm going to bring it up because I'm a bus rider, and I would like to talk to Metro more about this.
Metro has plans to roll out 2,000 new bus shelters in the next 5 years. Alcorn says, given the findings of our study, she wants to know what Metro is planning.
Because I think it weighs in, and you don't want to have this study done and then have just the same old standard design.
Alcorn also says the idea of planting trees near bus stops stood out to her as something the city could address as part of their goal to plant 4.6 million trees by 2030. But our reporting revealed that 3 years in, and there's still no coordinated strategy around where to plant trees to reduce heat.
We throw out the 4 million trees all the time, but there's not really a strategy.
She says she'd like to see a consortium formed to focus on planting trees to reduce heat.
To look at how Houston tackles this in a strategic and a smart way, rather than just scatter plot, let's plant some trees here and plant some trees there.
A county-wide project is an important way to approach solutions. But Sarah Will Ernst tells us about how local projects provide an opportunity too.
I interviewed City Council member Tiffany Thomas, and she talked about an infrastructure project soon to come on Bissonnette Street in Southwest Houston.
That's my problem child area is Bissonnette.
A $25 million grant from the federal government is going towards rebuilding 7 miles of sidewalk on that street. Thomas says after speaking to us and reading the investigation, she's now considering how they can design for trees that benefit transit riders.
But that would be the opportunity to do it, right? And so if you just do it in the current way, in the existing structure, it's difficult. But if we're going to go in and gut it up anyway, and kind of redesign what that area looks like from walkability, access, why wouldn't we add the tree component?
Another local project in that part of town is also thinking about cooling bus riders. This one touches on the third and last solution we mentioned, redesigning bus shelters for the heat. $9 million is going into 200 new bus shelters in Precinct 4, around the Gulfton-Sharpstown area.
We don't need bus shelters that are actually going to be hotter than as if they were not there. So how do we design them in a way with the cooling?
That's County Commissioner Leslie Briones. She read our investigation and says it's relevant to ongoing projects in her precinct that deal with both heat and transit.
And the data that you all collected, I thought was staggering and deeply concerning in the most positive way, right? What are we going to do about it in terms of actionable changes?
And that this data might inform how they approach bus shelter designs moving forward.
I would invite you to be an extended part of the Precinct 4 team, because given your expertise in this area, and all of our team would be thrilled to have your ideas.
The last of our feedback we want to share is actually about one solution we didn't dive too much into: increasing how often the bus comes. Several riders mentioned this idea in our survey and follow-up interviews. Here's Gabe Cazares with Link Houston.
I think the frequency and the reliability of the bus network will actually move people from feeling like they need a single occupancy vehicle to get everywhere to actually embrace mass transportation in our region.
He thinks if officials took the bus more often, they would better understand the issues facing riders.
I invite anyone from the agency, from Metro, to go with me and spend some time on the transit system. Not on these special buses that are designated for when board members have a public appearance or there's somebody from the federal government coming, so that we can have a performative experience of what transit looks like. If folks actually spend time using the system that we have today, I think their reaction would be a lot different.
I'm Sarah Willa Ernst.
And I'm Katie Watkins in Houston.
This story is an excerpt from a Houston Public Media podcast called Hot Stops. You can find it on all podcast platforms and check out the full investigation at texasstandard.org.